He thought she was beneath him, just another face in the crowd. But the day Jackson humiliated that delivery girl in front of everyone was the very day he signed away a $5.5 billion deal. Jackson Moreau lived in a glass fortress high above the city. Every inch of his penthouse screamed power, walls lined with rare art, imported Italian marble, floors, and a panoramic skyline view worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. To the world, he was untouchable, young, arrogant, and dazzlingly rich. A self-made millionaire who believed no one could question him. Every morning, Jackson's routine was the same. He sipped his overpriced coffee brewed by someone else, signed contracts worth millions, without blinking, and dismissed anyone who didn't meet his high standards. To him, money wasn't just power, it was proof that he was superior. His assistant, Mimi, often watched him with quiet concern. She admired his brilliance but despised the pride dripping from his every word. Jackson wasn't just confident, he was careless with people's feelings. Mimi knew, deep down, that one day his pride would destroy him. And she wasn't wrong. That morning was different. While Jackson barked orders across his boardroom, a small disruption appeared. An ordinary delivery girl named Stacy. Her uniform was wrinkled, her shoes worn out, but her eyes held a quiet strength. She walked in with a small package, her posture dignified, even though her job placed. Her at the bottom of the social ladder that Jackson lived to look down on. He barely looked at her. To him, she was invisible. "Set it down," he commanded, waving a dismissive hand, as if she were nothing more than a shadow passing by. But when Stacy hesitated, waiting for him to sign the delivery receipt, Jackson smirked. "Do you even understand how much this deal is worth? That tiny package is more valuable than your entire salary for the year. You should feel lucky just to set foot in this building." The room fell silent. Executives shifted uncomfortably. Mimi lowered her gaze, ashamed. Stacy's cheeks flushed, but she didn't let the sting show. With steady hands, she placed the package on the table and looked Jackson directly in the eye. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to slice through his arrogance. "Respect is free," she said softly. "But not everyone can afford it." Her words landed like a quiet thunderclap. Even Jones, one of Jackson's business partners, seated at the far end of the table, arched a brow, his sharp eyes studying both of them closely. Jackson laughed, dismissing her words as nonsense. "Respect? That doesn't sign billion-dollar deals. That doesn't buy penthouses in the clouds. You should stick to delivering packages and leave the thinking to people who matter." The boardroom echoed with forced chuckles, but the tension was thick. No one dared challenge him. No one, except the girl with the delivery bag slung over her shoulder. Stacy didn't argue. She didn't even flinch. She simply nodded, signed the receipt herself when Jackson refused, and walked out with her head held high. The sound of the door closing was heavier than it should have been. Mimi's stomach churned. Jones tapped his pen slowly, almost like he'd just witnessed something he could use later. And Jackson? He smirked, utterly convinced he'd crushed someone else beneath his ego. But destiny, as it turned out, had already started keeping score. Hours later, Jackson leaned back in his leather chair, celebrating. $5.5 billion, he boasted. Signed, sealed, and delivered. His glass of champagne sparkled under the boardroom lights. To him, this was proof that his arrogance had no consequences. But what Jackson didn't know was that Jones, the man who had watched everything silently, was no ordinary partner. He was the closest advisor to the very investors behind the deal, and Jones never forgot the look on Stacy's face or the dignity in her words. The empire Jackson worshipped was about to tremble because of one small act of cruelty. Have you ever seen someone treat another person like they were nothing? Have you ever been humiliated, not because of who you are, but because of what you do? Stacy's story is proof that life has a way of flipping the script. The girl Jackson thought was beneath him would soon hold more power over his fate than he could ever imagine. And the billionaire who believed respect was worthless was about to lose everything because of it. Before I take you deeper into this unbelievable story of pride, humiliation, and unexpected love, make sure you subscribe to Mr. Leonardo stories right now. Tap the like button if you believe no human deserves to be treated as less than, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever faced someone arrogant like Jackson. Your support helps us share more stories filled with love, morals, and life lessons. Because this story isn't just about money, it's about what money can never buy. As Stacy walked away that morning, she thought the incident was over. Just another day, just another arrogant man in a suit. But what she didn't know was that her quiet dignity had left an imprint on everyone in that room. Especially on Jones, whose whispered words in the right ear would soon bring Jackson's empire crashing down. And what Jackson didn't know was that the girl he laughed at would one day hold his heart in her hands. This is where the story begins. Jackson Moreau lived in a world built on glass and steel. From the top of his 37th floor penthouse, the city stretched beneath him like a conquered kingdom. At night, the skyline glittered like jewels laid out just for him. To most, it was breathtaking. To Jackson, it was proof. Proof that he had won the game of life, and everyone else was just playing catch-up. His mornings began with routines that were more rituals than necessities. The curtains pulled back automatically at 7. The smell of imported beans filled the air as his personal barista brewed his coffee. His Italian silk robe dragged along polished marble floors. He didn't walk. He glided, confident, untouchable, basking in the quiet arrogance of knowing he owned everything he touched. In his closet, rows of suits, worth more than most people's annual rent, hung in perfect alignment. His cufflinks sparkled under recessed lighting. His shoes, handmade in Florence, reflected his face when he leaned down. To Jackson, appearance wasn't just important, it was everything. His wardrobe was a war chest, his smile a weapon, and his fortune his shield. Jackson often lingered in front of his mirror before leaving for work. He liked what he saw: tall, sharp features, a jawline that seemed cut from stone, and eyes that carried both charm and cruelty. Women chased him, men envied him, and the world bent to his will. Yet, as he adjusted his tie each morning, he whispered the same mantra to his reflection: money is respect. Power is love. Without it, you are nothing. It was more than a belief. It was the core of who he was. By 32, Jackson had built an empire that newspapers labeled bulletproof. Luxury condos, high-end tech investments, sprawling business ventures. His name carried weight in every boardroom, and his presence demanded attention. When Jackson walked in, conversations stopped. His smile could close a deal. His scowl could end careers. At the office, his employees bowed, figuratively, if not literally. Assistants scrambled, executives stammered, interns trembled. To them, Jackson wasn't just a boss. He was a storm they prayed wouldn't strike their direction. Mimi, his executive assistant, had been by his side for 4 years. Sharp, efficient, and loyal, she admired his brilliance but loathed his arrogance. She knew Jackson was capable of greatness beyond money, but his pride blinded him. He treated kindness like weakness, humility like disease. She remembered once suggesting he should attend a charity gala, not for publicity, but for genuine good. He had laughed in her face. Charity doesn't make money, Mimi. It makes beggars feel important. That sentence had never left her mind. Jackson was obsessed with 2 things: money and control. Deals weren't just business, they were battles. Competitors weren't rivals, they were enemies to be destroyed. He collected enemies as trophies, wore their failures like medals. Late nights often found him sprawled across his leather sofa, reviewing contracts with a glass of bourbon in hand. Women came and went, their perfume lingering long after their names were forgotten. To Jackson, intimacy was just another transaction, something to indulge in, not something to cherish. Yet, deep inside, there was a restlessness, a hunger money couldn't fill. But Jackson ignored it, drowning it with louder victories, bigger deals, and more ruthless dismissals of anyone who dared to stand in his way. Mimi noticed everything: the way Jackson's jaw tightened when someone disagreed, the way he dismissed waiters without eye contact, the way he mocked strangers' jobs as if they were beneath him. She remembered a particular meeting last year when Jackson had laughed at a janitor who accidentally spilled water in the lobby. "If you can't even mop right," he had sneered, "you don't deserve the job." Mimi had seen the janitor's face crumble, and for the first time she'd wanted to scream at her boss. But she stayed silent because Jackson wasn't a man you argued with, not if you valued your paycheck. Still, she knew, pride like his couldn't last forever. Life had a way of humbling even the tallest towers. Despite his cold exterior, Jackson wasn't immune to charm. He liked the chase, the thrill of winning over women he deemed worthy. But even in romance, it was never about love. It was about conquest. He once told Mimi, "Love is for poets. I prefer power. And women prefer power too." Yet behind his laughter, Mimi caught glimpses of something unspoken. Sometimes, when he was alone, his eyes lingered on couples walking hand in hand outside his office window. A flash of longing would cross his face, quickly replaced by the mask of arrogance. Mimi wondered if one day someone would break through that armor. Someone who wouldn't bow to his wealth. Someone who'd challenge him in ways no billion-dollar contract ever could. She never imagined it would be a girl carrying a delivery bag. The boardroom was Jackson's throne. Here, he was unstoppable. Executives bent to his will, partners courted his approval, and rivals prayed for his mercy. It was in this space that he felt most alive. But power built on pride is fragile. Mimi sensed it. Jones, one of his longtime associates, sensed it too. They watched him play king, both knowing kingdoms fall faster than they rise. And fate? Fate was already arranging the first domino. That morning, as Jackson prepared for what he believed would be the crowning achievement of his career, a $5 billion deal, he polished his cufflinks, smirked at his reflection, and whispered once again, "Money is respect, power is love. Without it, you are nothing." What he didn't know was that life was preparing to prove him wrong. The stage was set, the audience was waiting, and the delivery girl was on her way. Stacey Harper's morning was the opposite of Jackson's. While he rose in a penthouse, she woke up in a small two-bedroom apartment she shared with her younger brother and an elderly grandmother. The walls were chipped, the windows cracked, but it was home. Her alarm clock rang at 5:30 a.m., but Stacey was already awake. She worked long hours for a delivery company, often juggling 2 shifts back-to-back to make sure her family had food on the table and her brother could continue his education. Life hadn't been kind, but she refused to let it break her. Where Jackson measured his worth in billions, Stacey measured hers in resilience. She was humble, hard-working, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that no amount of poverty could strip away. On that morning, she buttoned up her faded uniform, tied her hair neatly, and whispered a promise to herself. One day, things will be better. Little did she know, her life was about to change, not by luck, but by the arrogance of a man who thought the world belonged to him. The package she carried wasn't large, just a small sealed box. But she knew from the order slip that it was important. Urgent delivery. Destination, Moreau Enterprises, the skyscraper everyone in the city knew. As she rode the elevator up 37 floors, Stacey held her delivery bag close. The building itself was intimidating. Gleaming walls, pristine floors, men, and women in sharp suits moving as if they were too busy for the world. She felt their eyes on her, some dismissive, some indifferent. But Stacey walked tall. She wasn't ashamed of her job. She believed every honest day's work had dignity, even if the world refused to see it. When the elevator doors slid open, Mimi met her with a polite but tired smile. "You're the delivery for Mr. Moreau?" "Yes," Stacey replied, adjusting the strap of her bag. Mimi's eyes softened. She knew what was about to happen. She wished she could shield this girl from Jackson's venom, but she also knew her boss too well. Jackson thrived on belittling those he deemed beneath him. "Wait here," Mimi whispered, before pushing open the glass doors to the boardroom. Inside, Jackson was in full command. Executives sat rigidly. Jones leaned back with quiet calculation, and Jackson's laughter filled the room like thunder. The moment Stacey stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. Jackson's eyes flicked toward her. He frowned, then smirked. "And what do we have here? Did someone order lunch?" The executives chuckled uneasily, their laughter forced. Mimi froze in place. Stacy felt her cheeks heat, but she didn't falter. She walked forward and placed the package neatly on the table. "Delivery for Mr. Moreau. Please sign here." Jackson leaned back in his chair, ignoring the clipboard she held out. Instead, he crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing as though studying her like an insect beneath glass. "Tell me something," he drawled, his voice laced with arrogance. "How much do they pay you for running around this city, carrying boxes for people who actually matter?" The words stung, but Stacy kept her composure. "Enough to get by," she replied calmly. Jackson laughed, the sound sharp. "Enough to get by? Do you realize that the box you're holding is worth more than your entire year's salary? Maybe 2, maybe 3. The executives shifted uncomfortably. Even Jones's eyes narrowed, though he said nothing. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Stacy's heart pounded, but she refused to let him strip her of dignity. She straightened her shoulders, looked him directly in the eye, and said quietly, "Respect is free, Mr. Moreau, but not everyone can afford it." The room froze. Mimi's lips parted in shock. A faint smile tugged at Jones's lips as he tapped his pen against the table. Jackson's expression hardened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered insignificant. "You think respect builds empires?" He sneered. "You think respect signs billion-dollar deals?" "No, sweetheart. Money does. Power does. People like me do." His voice rose, filling the room with his arrogance. But Stacy didn't waver. She simply nodded, collected her clipboard, and stepped back. Her calmness only deepened the sting of her words. As she walked out, the boardroom was heavy with silence. No one dared speak. No one dared side with her. But her presence lingered long after the door closed. Mimi avoided Jackson's eyes, ashamed of her own silence. Jones leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "And Jackson?" He smirked, satisfied. To him, it was nothing but a minor distraction. A girl who would go back to her small life while he went on to close the biggest deal of his career. But destiny had already taken note. Jones was a man who believed in watching before acting. He had built his fortune not just on business acumen, but on reading people. And what he saw in Jackson that day confirmed what he'd long suspected. Jackson's pride was not just arrogance, it was poison. He also saw something else, Stacy's quiet strength. Her words had cut through the air like a blade. "Respect is free, but not everyone can afford it." That line replayed in Jones's mind, and he wondered if Jackson treated strangers like this in public. What kind of man was he in private? Could a man like this be trusted with $5.5 billion? Jones didn't speak then, but his silence carried weight. In the elevator, Stacy exhaled deeply, her hands trembling slightly. She hated confrontation, but she hated injustice more. She thought of her grandmother's words, "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. They can strip you of everything, but never your dignity." She didn't realize that her courage had just set in motion a chain of events that would shake a millionaire's empire to its foundation. What about you? If you were in Stacy's shoes, humiliated in front of powerful people, would you have spoken up, or would you have stayed quiet? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe every job deserves respect, hit the like button. Subscribe for more stories like this, because what happens next will prove that destiny has a sense of humor. As Stacy disappeared into the lobby below, Jackson raised his glass of champagne, celebrating the imminent close of his $5.5 billion deal. He thought he'd silenced her with his wealth, buried her words under his arrogance. But what he didn't know was that Jones's silence wasn't agreement, it was judgment. And the investors who trusted Jones's judgment would soon make a decision that would bring Jackson's world crashing down. And when Jackson crossed paths with Stacy again, it wouldn't be as master and servant. It would be as a man stripped of everything, standing before the one woman who had dared to defy him. The story was only beginning. The boardroom emptied that afternoon, leaving Jackson basking in his glory. The deal, worth $5.5 billion, was finalized. Contracts signed, champagne poured, congratulations whispered. Jackson stood at the center of it all, a king on his throne. "This is just the beginning," he boasted, lifting his glass high. "No one in this city, no one in this country, operates on my level. I don't just win deals, I own them." His executives clapped. Mimi forced a smile, though her stomach twisted. She knew her boss well enough to see the storm brewing behind the shine of his success. Pride this loud always carried a cost. At the far end of the room, Jones sipped his drink in silence, his expression unreadable, his mind calculating. He wasn't a man easily impressed, and Jackson's arrogance today had crossed a line he could not ignore. What Jackson never understood was this: Jones wasn't just another business partner. He was the right hand of the very investors whose billions fueled Jackson's empire. His influence wasn't loud, but it was absolute. And as he replayed the delivery girl's words, "Respect is free, but not everyone can afford it," Jones couldn't shake the feeling that she had spoken directly to the heart of the matter. What kind of man ridiculed strangers in front of others? What kind of leader mocked the very people who kept the wheels of society turning? Jones didn't speak his thoughts aloud. Instead, he simply nodded when investors called later that evening. His opinion, couched in subtle but sharp words, was enough to shift their confidence. "Arrogance," he said smoothly, "is a dangerous foundation for a $5.5 billion deal." Meanwhile, Jackson reveled in his supposed victory. He threw a lavish party in his penthouse that night, inviting models, celebrities, and businessmen eager to bask in his glow. The music thundered, glasses clinked, and Jackson moved through the crowd like a man invincible. But even as the champagne flowed, whispers had begun. Investors grew cautious. Phone calls were exchanged behind closed doors. By morning, rumors would swirl that Jackson's empire wasn't as untouchable as it seemed. And Jackson, he noticed none of it. His pride was too loud. While Jackson celebrated, Stacy returned to her modest apartment. She set down her delivery bag, massaged her tired shoulders, and began cooking dinner for her brother and grandmother. Her brother Matthew studied at the kitchen table, his books spread wide. "How was work?" he asked, without looking up. Stacy smiled faintly. It was interesting. She didn't tell him about the humiliation. She didn't mention the millionaire who had mocked her. Instead, she stirred the pot of soup and thought about her grandmother's wisdom. People who look down on others are only showing how empty they are inside. That night, as Jackson drowned in luxury, Stacy fell asleep to the sound of her brother's soft snores and her grandmother's whispered prayers. Two worlds, two lives, about to collide again. 2 days later, Jackson walked into his office expecting to bask in headlines of his triumph. Instead, he was greeted with silence. Phones rang unanswered. His executives shifted nervously. "Why is everyone looking like they've seen a ghost?" he demanded. Mimi hesitated, then handed him a newspaper. The headline read, "Investors rethink billion-dollar deal. Confidence in Moreau Enterprises wavers." Jackson's jaw clenched. What nonsense is this? But beneath his anger was the first spark of fear. Later that afternoon, Jackson stormed into Jones's office. "What's going on? I thought this deal was secure." Jones looked up calmly, his gaze sharp. "Deals are secure when the men behind them are secure. Confidence is everything, Jackson. And you, my friend, have lost it." Jackson sneered. "Because of a few rumors? Please. Investors follow money, and I have plenty." Jones leaned forward, his voice low and measured. "Money buys influence. Respect sustains it. You mocked a delivery girl in front of half your board, Jackson. Do you think word doesn't travel? Do you think people don't notice how you treat others?" For the first time in years, Jackson had no immediate reply. His face burned, not with shame, but with rage at the idea that such a small incident could threaten billions. But Jones's silence after that spoke louder than words. Meanwhile, Stacy had no idea her quiet dignity had echoed into boardrooms. She continued working her shifts, caring for her family, and attending evening classes at the university. One of her professors, impressed with her diligence, pulled her aside. "You're one of my brightest students, Stacy. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Your future is bigger than you realize." She smiled, grateful, but she didn't yet know how deeply her words had shaken a millionaire's world. As days passed, Jackson's frustration grew. Deals stalled. Investors hesitated. News outlets began questioning whether his arrogance was finally catching up to him. He barked orders at Mimi, blamed executives, and cursed at phone calls. But behind closed doors, he poured himself glass after glass of bourbon, his once unshakable confidence cracking. He replayed Jones's words in his head. Money buys influence. Respect sustains it. And though he hated to admit it, he began to hear Stacy's voice as well. Respect is free, but not everyone can afford it. Do you believe arrogance alone can destroy a billionaire, or do you think Jackson is strong enough to recover? Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button if you believe respect matters more than money. And don't forget to subscribe, because the story is about to take an even more shocking turn. That night, Jackson sat alone in his penthouse. The laughter of the party was gone. The champagne glasses stood empty. The silence pressed in on him like a weight. He stared out at the city he once believed he owned and whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "I can't lose this deal." Not to a girl with a delivery bag, but fate had already made its choice. And the next time Jackson saw Stacy, it wouldn't be as a forgettable stranger. It would be as a man beginning to realize he'd lost more than just money. He was losing himself. The morning came like a hammer. Jackson Moreau, who had gone to sleep certain of his brilliance, woke to the sound of buzzing phones, frantic emails, and a headline that made his blood run cold. $5.5 billion deal collapses. Moreau Enterprises under fire. He read it twice, his jaw tightening. The article was merciless. Investors had pulled back, citing concerns about leadership style. Rumors swirled about arrogance, mistreatment of staff, and questionable respect for partners. The humiliation wasn't private, it was splashed across every business. Paper whispered in every boardroom, dissected on every news channel. For the first time, Jackson wasn't the predator. He was the prey. At his office, the atmosphere was tense. Executives avoided his gaze, assistants whispered nervously, and even the security guard at the front desk couldn't hide his curiosity. Mimi placed the papers on his desk with quiet composure. "It's everywhere, Jackson." He slammed his fist against the desk, rattling the glass. "This is sabotage, lies, jealous men trying to bring me down." But Mimi didn't flinch. She looked at him with calm eyes and said words that pierced deeper than any headline. "Maybe, Jackson, this is just the truth finally catching up to you." Meetings were cancelled. Calls went unanswered. Investors who once begged for his attention now avoided him. Jackson's phone, once a constant stream of praise and demands, fell silent. In the space of a week, he went from untouchable king to man on shaky ground. The empire hadn't collapsed, but the cracks were visible, and the world was watching. Late at night, Jackson paced his penthouse, bourbon in hand, staring at the skyline that no longer looked like his kingdom. For the first time, he felt something foreign, fear. But even more haunting than fear was the echo of a soft voice. "Respect is free, but not everyone can afford it." While Jackson battled humiliation, Stacy's life continued. Quiet, steady, purposeful. One evening, after finishing her deliveries, she rushed to the local university where she attended evening classes. Her professor had encouraged her to join a student panel for an upcoming community event. Nervous but determined, Stacy agreed. That night, dressed in simple but elegant attire, not her delivery uniform, she stood on stage under warm lights, speaking to a room full of students and donors about resilience, dignity, and the importance of opportunity for those from modest backgrounds. Her words were heartfelt, her presence radiant. The same quiet dignity she had carried into Jackson's boardroom now glowed brightly in front of an audience that respected her. And fate, mischievous as always, had arranged for Jackson to be in that audience. He hadn't planned to be there. One of his advisors, desperate to rehabilitate his public image, had insisted he attend the university's charity forum. "It'll look good, Jackson. Show them you care." Reluctantly, he came. He expected boredom, forced smiles, shallow speeches. Instead, he saw her. Stacy, but not the delivery girl in a wrinkled uniform. Tonight, she stood tall, her posture graceful, her voice strong. She spoke of working hard, of caring for her family, of believing in dignity even when the world tried to take it away. Jackson's breath caught. He felt something he hadn't expected, something dangerously close to admiration. When the panel ended, Jackson found himself moving toward her, as though drawn by a force beyond pride or logic. Mimi, standing nearby, noticed and shook her head slightly, silently warning him not to make a fool of himself. But Jackson ignored her. "Stacy," he said when she turned, her eyes widening in surprise. Her expression hardened immediately. "Mr. Moreau." The air between them was tense, charged with unspoken memory. Jackson shifted, for once unsure of himself. "You spoke well," he managed. "Better than most people I know in my circles." Stacy's lips curved in a small, unimpressed smile. "Strange words, coming from someone who once mocked me for carrying a box." Her words stung, sharper than any headline. Jackson wanted to defend himself, to explain, but for the first time in his life, excuses failed him. And yet, beneath the tension, there was something else, an undeniable pull. Jackson noticed the way her eyes glimmered under the lights, the confidence in her voice, the strength in her presence. Stacy, against her better judgment, noticed too. His arrogance hadn't dimmed his physical appeal, his tall frame, his sharp features, his commanding presence. But she refused to let attraction blind her. "You should leave me alone, Mr. Moreau," she said softly. "Our worlds don't mix." But her voice lacked conviction, and Jackson heard it. Later that night, Mimi cornered him in the lobby. "Don't drag her into your mess, Jackson. She deserves better." He frowned. "You think I don't know that? Then prove it," Mimi replied. "Change, or leave her out of it." Should Stacy give Jackson another chance, or should she keep her distance from a man who humiliated her? Drop your answers in the comments below. That night, Jackson sat alone in his car outside the university. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about money or deals. He was thinking about Stacy, her words, her strength, her beauty. He realized with a bitter pang that he wanted something he couldn't buy. Not respect, not love, not her. And fate, ever watchful, had just handed him the one chance to learn that. Some treasures couldn't be earned with billions, but with humility. The tide had turned. For nights after the university forum, Jackson couldn't sleep. He replayed every detail, her voice, her poise, the way she'd faced him without fear. He poured himself bourbon after bourbon, staring at his reflection in the penthouse windows. For years, that reflection had been his crown, the sharp suit, the confident smirk, the untouchable aura. But now, staring back at him, he saw cracks. Her words haunted him, strange words, coming from someone who once mocked me for carrying a box. No amount of money, no deal, no luxury drowned out the sting. For the first time, Jackson wondered if he wasn't as invincible as he thought. At the office, Mimi noticed the shift. He barked fewer orders. His temper was still sharp, but it fizzled quicker. He lingered longer in silence. One evening, as she organized files, she said softly, "You're changing, Jackson. And not because of a deal, because of her." He didn't deny it. He simply asked, almost in a whisper, "Do you think she could ever forgive me?" Mimi looked at him carefully. Forgiveness isn't bought with apologies or gifts. It's earned. And for someone like Stacy, it will take more than words. It will take change. Fate arranged another meeting a week later. Jackson attended a community fundraiser, again, at the insistence of his advisors. But secretly, he hoped she'd be there. And she was. Stacy stood at a small table, helping organize food donations. No stage, no spotlight, just her hands working diligently, her smile warm as she greeted people. Jackson froze, watching her. For the first time, he saw beauty not in glamour, but in kindness. Her laughter was soft, her gestures gentle, her presence radiant. He approached slowly. "You always seem to be where I least expect you." Stacy looked up, her expression neutral. "Or maybe you're just noticing now." "Can we talk?" Jackson asked. She hesitated, then nodded. They stepped outside into the cool night air, the noise of the fundraiser fading behind them. Jackson shoved his hands into his pockets, his usual confidence stripped away. "I was wrong, Stacy. That day, I said things I shouldn't have. I treated you like you were beneath me. I've been replaying it ever since." Stacy studied him, searching for cracks in his armor. "Do you really regret it? Or do you regret the consequences?" Her words hit hard. Jackson swallowed. "Both," he admitted. "But mostly, the way I made you feel. You didn't deserve it." They stood in silence for a moment. Jackson's gaze lingered on her, her eyes steady and clear, her lips pressed together thoughtfully, her posture graceful. "I don't expect you to forgive me tonight," he whispered. "But I want to try, to be better, to be someone worthy of respect, not fear." The honesty in his tone softened her, though she hid it. "Respect isn't bought with money, Jackson," she said gently. "It's earned, and it's earned one choice at a time." He nodded, and for the first time didn't argue. Their eyes met in the quiet glow of the streetlights, a charge humming between them. Jackson resisted the urge to touch her, but the closeness itself felt intimate, an intimacy deeper than he'd ever experienced. In the days that followed, Jackson found excuses to see her again. He offered rides after her classes, sometimes waiting in his sleek car, just to make sure she got home safely. One evening she finally asked, "Why are you doing this?" He hesitated. "Because I want to see you. Because you remind me of who I could be if I stopped being the man I was." Stacy tilted her head. "Words are easy, Jackson. But I'll believe you when I see change, not before." That night, as he dropped her at her apartment, she hesitated before stepping out. "Thank you for the ride." Jackson smiled faintly. "Thank you for not giving up on me yet." Their eyes lingered, and for a moment it felt like time stretched. Her hand brushed against his as she took the door handle, just a fleeting touch, but enough to send sparks through him. For Jackson, who had treated intimacy as a transaction, this simple brush of skin felt more powerful than any night of shallow pleasure. Determined to prove himself, Jackson made a quiet decision. He visited the delivery company where Stacy worked. Instead of striding in like a king, he arrived humbly, speaking to the workers, thanking them for their service, even tipping them generously. When Stacy heard about it later, she was stunned. She didn't confront him, but she couldn't deny he was trying. "Let me ask you this. If someone who once humiliated you began to change, truly change, would you give them another chance? Or would you guard your heart no matter what?" One evening, after a week of small but genuine efforts, Jackson found himself walking Stacy home. They stopped at the corner near her apartment, the streetlights casting a warm glow. "Good night, Stacy," he said softly. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time her expression softened. "Good night, Jackson." Their eyes lingered, two worlds colliding, two hearts inching closer. And though nothing more happened that night, both of them felt it, the beginning of something fragile, something real, something worth fighting for. Humility had cracked open Jackson's pride, and in that crack, the first seeds of love began to grow. Jackson was not used to silence. For most of his life, he had thrived on applause, on the sound of people rushing to obey him, on the rhythm of wealth flowing into his accounts. But now, silence was his companion, and in that silence, he finally began to listen. He thought of Stacy's words, of Mimi's stern looks, of Jones's calm judgment. Pride had built his empire, but it was also crumbling. He wanted, no, needed, change. And for the first time, he wanted it not for money, not for reputation, but for Stacy. The first step was awkward. Jackson stood in the lobby of Moreau Enterprises, dressed in a simple suit without his usual arrogance. He approached the janitorial team, the same kind of men and women he had mocked years ago. One older janitor looked at him warily. "Mr. Moreau, is something wrong?" Jackson cleared his throat. "No. I just wanted to say thank you for what you do here." The room fell silent. The staff exchanged confused glances. Jackson pressed on, though his voice trembled. "I've ignored you. I've disrespected people like you in the past. That was wrong. Without you, this building wouldn't shine. And I need you to know. I see that now." The old janitor's eyes softened, and a younger one whispered, "Did he just thank us?" Jackson smiled faintly. "Yes, and it won't stop there. Starting next month, you'll have increased benefits. Healthcare, better equipment, scholarships for your kids." Gasps filled the room. For Jackson, it wasn't about headlines. It was about facing the humanity he'd once denied. For the staff, it was the first time their billionaire boss had looked them in the eye. Later that evening, Mimi entered his office with tears in her eyes. "I heard what you did downstairs." Jackson looked up, unsure if she approved. "You're really trying, aren't you?" she whispered. He nodded. "For the first time, Mimi, I don't want to be admired. I want to be respected. By her, by people, by myself." Mimi smiled softly. "It's about time, Jackson." Meanwhile, Stacy balanced her delivery shifts with her university classes. Her life was still hard, but she felt a sense of progress. She didn't know that whispers about Jackson's humility were spreading. She didn't know that her quiet dignity was changing him. One evening after class, she found Jackson leaning casually against his car near the gate. Not his flashy sports car, but a modest sedan. "Waiting for someone?" she asked, arching a brow. "Yes," he replied, eyes locked on hers. "You?" She hesitated. "You think I'll just get in the car because you asked?" Jackson's lips curved into a sheepish smile. "No, I think you'll get in because you're tired, and I'd like to make your night a little easier." Stacy studied him, searching for the arrogance she expected. But all she saw was sincerity. With a sigh, she slid into the passenger seat. The drive was quiet at first. Jackson gripped the wheel, uncharacteristically nervous. "You know," Stacy said eventually, "a car ride doesn't erase arrogance." "I know," he replied quickly, "but maybe it shows effort." She smirked. "Effort isn't the same as change." He nodded. "Then I'll keep trying until it is." Her eyes softened for a moment before she looked away. He wasn't forgiven. Not yet. But the wall around her heart had a crack. A week later, Jackson showed up at Stacy's apartment building carrying grocery bags. Her grandmother opened the door, startled. "Mr. Moreau, what are you doing here?" Jackson bowed his head slightly. "Please, call me Jackson. I thought you could use some help." Stacy arrived moments later, her eyes wide. "Why are you here?" Jackson set the bags on the counter. "Not to impress you, not to buy forgiveness, just to be useful." Her grandmother smiled warmly. "A proud man carrying groceries. That's change, child." Stacy frowned, but said nothing. Still, deep inside, something shifted. That night, after dinner, Jackson walked Stacy outside. The air was cool, the moonlight soft. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her arms folded. "Because I need to prove I'm not the man who humiliated you. Because when I see you, I want to be better." The vulnerability in his tone stunned her. She looked away, her heart racing. He stepped closer, careful not to cross the line. "I don't want to scare you, but when I'm near you, I feel something I've never felt before." Her breath caught. Their eyes locked, tension sparking between them. For a moment, it felt like the world held still. But Stacy turned away. "Words are easy, Jackson. Change is harder." Jackson exhaled. "Then I'll change. For you. For me." The days that followed brought small moments that grew sweeter with each encounter. And Jackson carried her delivery bag when it was heavy. He waited for her after night classes, insisting she shouldn't walk home alone. And once, when the wind blew her hair into her face, he reached out instinctively, brushing it back with a tenderness that made her heart stumble. She pushed his hand away, flustered. "You don't get to do that." He chuckled softly. "Then why didn't you stop me sooner?" Her cheeks warmed, and she had no answer. That night, Jackson dreamed of her, not in the shallow, fleeting way he once dreamed of women, but in vivid, emotional colors. Her laughter, her eyes, the way she carried herself. When he woke, he realized with a shiver, he wasn't just trying to win her respect. He was falling in love. Stacy wasn't blind to Jackson's efforts. She saw the way he carried her deliveries, how he waited after classes, how he was softer in his words. But just as she began to let her guard down, fate introduced another twist. Jackie. He wasn't new in her life. Jackie was a fellow student in her evening class, a kind, steady man who always treated Stacy with warmth. He had a smile that put people at ease and a work ethic that mirrored her own. Unlike Jackson, Jackie didn't arrive in expensive suits or sleek cars. He showed up with humility already written into his character. And unlike Jackson, Jackie had never humiliated her. One evening, after class, Jackie walked with Stacy to the bus stop. "You work so hard," he said gently. "You inspire me, Stacy. I know you've got a lot on your shoulders, but you carry it with so much grace." Stacy smiled, touched. "Thank you, Jackie." It was simple, genuine, no arrogance, no weight of a broken history. And for a moment, Stacy wondered, why invite pain into her life when something easier, kinder, was right in front of her? From across the street, Jackson watched. He had arrived, as always, to pick her up. But seeing her laugh softly at Jackie's words, seeing her smile without hesitation, it pierced him in a way money never had. Later, in the car, Stacy said nothing about Jackie. Jackson didn't ask, but his jaw was tight, his grip on the steering wheel firm. Finally, he broke the silence. "He seems close to you." Stacy raised a brow. "He's my friend. He respects me." Jackson flinched. The word respect landed like a blade. "And I don't?" "You're learning," she replied softly. It wasn't cruelty, it was truth. And Jackson did not argue. The next day, Mimi cornered Jackson in his office. "You're jealous, aren't you?" Jackson sighed. "He's good for her. He's everything I'm not." Mimi leaned against the desk, folding her arms. "Then prove her wrong. Not with money, not with pride, with patience. If you've really changed, you'll let her choose, even if it breaks you." Her words cut deep. But for once, Jackson didn't resist. Jackie continued to be present in Stacy's life. He helped her carry books after class, studied with her in the library, and even visited her grandmother, charming the older woman with his politeness. One evening, Jackie brought flowers to Stacy's home. "For you," he said shyly. "Not because of any reason, just because you deserve beautiful things." Stacy blushed. "Jackie, you don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted softly. Her grandmother smiled approvingly from the doorway. "Now that's a gentleman." Jackson heard about it the next day when Stacy casually mentioned Jackie's kindness. It felt like a dagger twisting in his chest. For the first time, Jackson, the man who owned billions, realized he might lose the only thing he truly wanted to a man with no fortune at all. That night, he sat in his penthouse, staring at his reflection. He whispered bitterly, "So this is what it feels like, to be powerless." Instead of confronting Stacy, Jackson did something he'd never done before. He confronted himself. He drove to Jackie's small apartment, unannounced. Jackie, startled, invited him in. "What do you want, Moreau?" Jackie asked cautiously. Jackson looked around the humble space, then met his gaze. "I want to say thank you for treating Stacy the way she deserves." Jackie frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" Jackson exhaled. "Because if she chooses you, I'll have to live with it, and I'll have to accept that you were the better man." Jackie blinked, shocked by the humility. "Do you love her?" Jackson's voice cracked. "More than I thought I could love anyone." For the first time in his life, Jackson admitted he might lose. And in that admission, he gained something greater. The next evening, Jackie told Stacy about Jackson's visit. Her heart stopped. "He came here?" she asked in disbelief. Jackie nodded. "And he told me, if you chose me, he'd accept it." "Stacy, I don't know what happened to him, but he's not the arrogant man you described anymore." Stacy sat in stunned silence, her heart pounding. Jackson's words echoed in her chest. "If she chooses you, I'll have to live with it." It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't pride. It was surrender, and it broke her. That night, when Jackson drove her home, Stacy finally looked at him differently. "Why didn't you tell me you visited Jackie?" she asked. Jackson's hands tightened on the wheel. "Because it wasn't about me. It was about you. You deserve happiness, Stacy, even if it's not with me." Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she reached across the console and touched his hand. "Jackson." He looked at her, his eyes burning with unshed emotion. The car felt charged, heavy with everything unsaid. Slowly, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. It wasn't lust. It wasn't a conquest. It was reverence. And in that moment, Stacy's guarded heart began to crumble. Over the next days, Stacy found herself torn between two men, Jackie, steady and kind, and Jackson, flawed but transformed. Her grandmother noticed her restlessness. "Child," she said one night, "love isn't about who never hurt you. It's about who changes because they refuse to lose you." Stacy's heart knew the truth. The rivalry hadn't ended, but the choice was becoming clearer. And Jackson, once arrogant, now humble, was proving day by day that redemption was not only possible but beautiful. Jackson Moreau had faced boardrooms full of ruthless men, journalists who tried to corner him, and competitors who wanted nothing more than to see him fall. He had outmaneuvered them all. Yet, as he stood before Stacy in the soft glow of the city lights, he felt more vulnerable than ever. "I used to think love was weakness," he began, his voice low and raw. "I thought power was what made a man strong, that if you controlled enough, earned enough, commanded enough, people would love you, or at least bow to you." His gaze dropped, shoulders tense. "But when you walked into my boardroom, carrying that package, and stood up to me, you broke something in me. And for the first time, I'm glad something broke." Stacy inhaled slowly, her heart pounding. She wanted to resist, but there was something in his eyes, something stripped of arrogance, that unsettled her defenses. "You humiliated me, Jackson," she whispered. Her words were sharp, but her voice wavered. "You didn't just mock me. You reminded me of every time society has told me I'm less because of my job, my status, my background. You made me feel invisible." Jackson's jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling. "I know, and I hate myself for it." Her eyes flickered with pain and doubt. "How do I know this isn't just guilt? How do I know you won't wake up one day, slip back into your arrogance, and break me all over again?" Jackson stepped closer, his movements careful, reverent. "Because I've lost everything money can buy, and discovered the one thing I truly want can't be bought at all. You. And if I lose you, Stacy, I lose myself." Her breath caught. She turned away quickly, blinking back tears. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to melt into his arms, but her scars screamed caution. That night, Stacy sat with her grandmother at the kitchen table. The older woman sipped tea, eyes kind but piercing. "You've been restless, child," she said softly. Stacy lowered her gaze. "He's different now, but I can't forget what he did. Part of me wants to trust him, another part of me wants to run." Her grandmother reached across the table, taking her hand. "Love is never safe, Stacy. It's always a risk. But ask yourself this, are his actions showing change or just his words? A man can say anything, but what he does when no one is watching, that is who he truly is." Stacy nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. The next day, Jackson invited her to his penthouse. Not for a dinner, not for a display of wealth, but just to talk. For the first time, the space looked bare to him. All the expensive art, marble and glass suddenly felt meaningless. "Do you know what this place is without you?" he asked, his voice breaking. An empty museum, a graveyard of pride. I thought this was everything, but now, it's nothing. He walked to the balcony, hands trembling. I've never admitted weakness to anyone, but with you, I don't want to hide. I don't want to be Jackson Moreau, the arrogant millionaire. I just want to be Jackson, the man trying not to lose the only woman who's ever made him feel human. Stacy stood frozen, her heart hammering. He had never looked so raw, so undone. When she finally stepped forward, her hands shook as she placed them on the balcony railing beside his. "Jackson," she whispered. He turned, his eyes searching hers desperately. She didn't kiss him. She didn't throw herself into his arms. Instead, she let her fingers brush against his, a small, fragile gesture, but one that spoke louder than any words. The simple contact made Jackson inhale sharply. For a man used to transactional intimacy, this feather-like touch felt overwhelming. He turned his hand, slowly intertwining his fingers with hers, savoring the warmth. They stood like that for minutes, city lights glowing around them, hearts pounding in rhythm. Over the following days, their connection deepened through conversations that stripped them bare. Jackson confessed fears he had never voiced, the loneliness of power, the emptiness of shallow relationships, the gnawing fear that without wealth, he was nothing. Stacy shared her struggles, the weight of responsibility for her brother and grandmother, the exhaustion of working and studying, the fear of trusting someone who had once crushed her dignity. They laughed over childhood stories, cried over past wounds, and teased each other gently. Who would have thought the arrogant millionaire could laugh about failing math as a kid? She teased one evening. Jackson smirked. Who would have thought the delivery girl could handle million-dollar debates better than half my executives? Their banter was light, but beneath it, intimacy bloomed. One evening, as they walked back from class, rain began to fall. Stacy squealed softly, pulling her jacket tighter. Jackson shrugged off his own coat, draping it around her shoulders without a word. She looked up at him, startled. Their eyes locked. The rain blurred the world around them, but in that moment, everything was sharp. His gaze, his warmth, the closeness of their bodies under the shared coat. Her breath quickened. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Jackson leaned in, his lips hovering near her ear. "Tell me you don't feel this, Stacy. Tell me, and I'll walk away." Her eyes fluttered closed, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She whispered, "I feel it." It was all he needed. He didn't kiss her lips. He kissed her forehead, softly, reverently, letting the rain mingle with the warmth of his touch. And Stacy's heart finally surrendered a piece of itself. Have you ever seen someone change so deeply that you had no choice but to believe in their transformation? Would you take the risk of trusting them, even if they once broke you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. But just as intimacy blossomed, Jackie returned. He didn't arrive with arrogance, he came with sincerity. "Stacy," he said one evening after class, "I can't compete with his wealth. I won't even try. But I can promise you one thing. My respect is unwavering. I'll never make you question your worth." Her heart ached. Jackie was good, kind, everything safe. But when she thought of Jackson, she felt fire, danger, transformation, and she didn't know if she was ready to choose. The next few days were a storm in Stacy's heart. Jackie's kindness was steady, like a calm river. Jackson's presence was fire, dangerous, consuming, irresistible. Jackie asked to meet her at a quiet cafe one evening. He clasped his hands, eyes earnest. "Stacy, I see the way he looks at you. I know he's trying, but I also know who he was, and people don't change overnight." Stacy swallowed hard. "He's not the same man, Jackie. I've seen it." Jackie leaned forward. "And what if it's temporary? What if, one day, his old self comes back and you're left broken? I would never do that to you." His words struck deeply. Jackie wasn't wrong, but her heart whispered a truth her mind couldn't silence. Jackson had already changed her too. Later that night, Stacy told Jackson about Jackie's words. She expected anger, defensiveness, and pride. Instead, He bowed his head. "Jackie's right to worry," Jackson admitted. "I've been arrogant, cruel even. I don't deserve your trust easily. And if you choose him, I'll accept it." Stacy blinked in shock. "You just let me go?" His voice cracked. "If I hold on to you with pride, then I haven't changed at all. Loving you means wanting what's best for you, even if it isn't me." For a man who once clung to everything with fists of iron, this humility shook Stacy to her core. The next day, Mimi found Stacy waiting in the lobby of Moreau Enterprises. "You're torn, aren't you?" she said gently. Stacy nodded. "How do I know this isn't just a show?" Mimi smiled faintly. "Because I've known Jackson for years. I've seen him trample people, mock them, dismiss them. But since you came along, I've seen him carry groceries, shake janitors' hands, and sit up all night, wondering if he's worthy of you. He's not perfect, but he's real. And that's more than I've ever seen from him." Stacy's chest tightened. Real. That was the word she'd been looking for. That evening, Stacy stood on Jackson's balcony once more, the city lights shimmering below. He turned when he heard her footsteps, his expression open, vulnerable. "Have you made your choice?" he asked softly. Stacy's breath trembled. She stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "Yes." He braced himself. "I choose you, Jackson. Not because you're rich, not because you're powerful. I choose you because you've changed. Because you've shown me the man behind the arrogance. The man who's learning to love." Jackson's knees nearly gave way. He closed the distance, cupping her face with trembling hands. "Say it again," he whispered. "I choose you." Their lips met, not in hunger, not in conquest, but in reverence. It was soft at first, hesitant, as if both were afraid the moment would shatter. Then deeper, sweeter, filled with every word left unspoken. Jackson pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were his anchor, his salvation. His lips trailed to her forehead, her cheeks back to her mouth, every kiss a promise. Stacy's hands rested on his chest, feeling his heart pounding wildly beneath. For the first time, she wasn't holding back. She let herself melt into him, safe in the knowledge that this wasn't arrogance. It was love. When they finally parted, both breathless, Jackson whispered against her lips, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you." Stacy smiled softly, brushing her thumb along his jaw. "And I'll spend the rest of mine reminding you that respect is free, but priceless." From that day forward, things changed. Jackson no longer measured success in deals, but in moments. He held Stacy's hand in public, unashamed. He treated waiters with gratitude, assistants with respect, and strangers with kindness. The transformation wasn't for show, it was lived in every small act. And Stacy? She flourished by his side, not as his shadow, but as his equal. She challenged him, teased him, comforted him. And in her love, Jackson found a peace he had never known. One night, as they sat on the balcony together, Jackson whispered, "Do you realize what you've done to me?" Stacy tilted her head, smiling. "What?" "You've made a man with billions realize he was poor. Until he found you." Her heart swelled, and she leaned into him, their fingers lacing together under the stars. The arrogant millionaire was gone. In his place stood a man transformed by love. And Stacy knew this wasn't just romance. This was redemption. Jackson Moreau had been a man of skyscrapers, structures built on power, arrogance, and fear. But when the $5.5 billion deal collapsed, the world expected his empire to crumble with it. Instead, it reshaped him. Boardrooms that once echoed with his arrogance now saw a quieter man. He listened more than he spoke, asked questions instead of giving commands, and treated the people around him with a respect they'd never known from him before. When an intern nervously presented a small idea, Jackson leaned forward, eyes sharp but warm. "That's brilliant. Expand on it." The young man left the room glowing. Mimi, who had once endured his pride in silence, now watched in awe. "You've changed, Jackson. You're not ruling anymore. You're leading." He smiled faintly. "I finally realized they're not the same thing." Through every step of this transformation, Stacy remained by his side, not as an ornament, not as someone hidden, but as his equal. She attended meetings with him sometimes, not to play the role of arm candy, but to offer perspective. Jackson valued her honesty more than the flattery of executives. One afternoon, after she challenged him in front of his own team, "Jackson, that proposal isn't practical for working families." He didn't silence her. He nodded. "She's right. Adjust the plan." Gasps filled the room. Jackson Moreau, the once proud tyrant, had just yielded to a woman he once humiliated. But for Jackson, it wasn't humiliation, it was growth. Later, he kissed her softly in the privacy of his office. "You keep me grounded, Stacy. Don't ever stop." She smiled against his lips. "I wasn't planning to." Their romance blossomed not just in grand gestures, but in the simple, everyday moments. And Jackson cooking pasta for her in his penthouse kitchen, fumbling with the sauce until Stacy laughed so hard she nearly cried. And Stacy dragging him to a community center to volunteer, where Jackson awkwardly carried boxes until kids started climbing on his shoulders. The two of them studying together at the university library, Jackson scribbling notes like a nervous student while Stacy teased him. These moments weren't glamorous, but they were real. And in them, both found a joy they had never known. Their intimacy deepened slowly, sweetly. On nights when Jackson's demons returned, the fear of failure, the echoes of pride, Stacy would curl against him on the couch, her hand resting over his heart. "You're more than your money, Jackson," she whispered. "You're more than your pride. You're a man who loves. That's enough." He kissed her forehead, lingering. "You make me feel like I'm worth more than all the billions I lost." Sometimes they simply held each other in silence, their breathing sinking, their hearts steady. The world outside could roar, but inside their embrace, there was peace. Jackson didn't stop at personal change. He extended it outward. He launched a new initiative in his company, scholarships for underprivileged youth, healthcare benefits for staff families, and mandatory volunteer hours for executives to stay connected to reality. The press tried to spin it as damage control, but the truth was undeniable. This wasn't for show, it was for people. One journalist asked bluntly, "Mr. Moreau, is this about repairing your reputation after losing the $5.5 billion deal?" Jackson shook his head. "This is about repairing my soul. My reputation will follow if it's meant to. But this is who I want to be." Stacy, standing beside him, smiled with quiet pride. Jackie eventually pulled Stacy aside one last time. "I see it now," he said gently. "He's not the man you described that first day. He's better. And you love him." Stacy touched his arm warmly. "I do. But thank you, Jackie, for showing me what respect looks like. It made me recognize it when Jackson finally gave it." Jackie smiled softly. "Then take care of each other." He left, not as a rival, but as a friend. Months later, Jackson stood at the same boardroom table where he had once humiliated Stacy. But this time, it was different. He invited her into the room, not as a delivery girl, not as a stranger, but as his partner. "Everyone," Jackson said, his hand resting lightly on Stacy's. "Meet the woman who taught me the greatest lesson of my life. That true wealth isn't measured in billions, but in the respect and love you earn." The room erupted in applause. Stacy's cheeks warmed, but her heart swelled. She squeezed his hand, whispering, "You really have changed." He kissed her hand gently. "Because of you, do you believe love can truly transform a person?" Do you think Jackson's change would have happened without Stacy? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because stories like this remind us that sometimes the richest people are those with the fullest hearts. That night, Jackson and Stacy returned to the balcony where everything had begun. The city stretched out before them, but it no longer looked like a kingdom to conquer. It looked like a world to love. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "I used to think destiny meant power, wealth, and control. Now I know destiny meant you." Her lips brushed his softly, tender and lingering. "And I used to think love was a luxury I couldn't afford. Now I know it's the greatest wealth of all." They stood there, wrapped in each other, hearts beating as one. The arrogant millionaire was gone. In his place was a man redeemed, not by money, not by pride, but by love. And so Jackson learned the hardest truth, that all the money in the world can't buy the one thing every human longs for, love and respect. He lost billions, but in that loss he found himself, and he found Stacy. Remember this, true wealth isn't counted in dollars or deals, but in the hearts you touch and the love you give. Pride can destroy, but humility rebuilds. If this story touched you, don't leave without liking, sharing and subscribing. Drop a comment and tell us, what does true wealth mean to you? Until next time, thank you for watching Mr. Leonardo Stories, where love, life lessons and inspiration come alive.